This happened a few years ago, during my first year of university. I'm from the UK, and I studied in York, which is considered a pretty safe city. I was with my friends on a night out clubbing, and as often happens on nights out, I lost them. I was tipsy but by no means drunk, and at this point my friends weren't answering their phones. I'd had enough, so I decided to walk home. My house was only around a 20-minute walk from town, and we always walked home, so I didn't really think much of walking home alone. As I was walking, though, this guy starts walking next to me. He was Asian, and maybe around 24, so not too much older than me. I was about 19 at the time. York is a pretty friendly city, and tipsy students often talk to other ones, so I assumed he was like me, just another alcohol-infused person making his way home. He started chatting me about the usual crap, asking what I studied and things like that. We'd only been walking for a couple of minutes when he started asking if I had a boyfriend. At this point, I started to feel a little uncomfortable. We weren't in a secluded area, but it was around 3 in the morning, and there were no cars or other people around. My mind didn't instantly label him as some crazed serial killer, but a boy trying his luck, which again is pretty common when you're a student. It wasn't really a big deal, but I didn't want to talk to him anymore. We'd only been walking together for about 5 minutes by this point. So now I tell him it was nice meeting him and talking to him, and that I was at my house. I just stopped outside of some random person's house and stood there, waiting for him to walk away, but I think he knew I was lying, and he didn't leave. This is when I started to feel really unnerved. He smiled at me and said, "My car is near here. Do you want a lift so I can make sure you get home safely?" When he said this, I felt a little scared. My chest felt so tight I couldn't even speak. I just sort of shook my head and mumbled some incomprehensible answer. Next, he comes right over to me and grabs my arm, saying he just wants to help me get home. I remember feeling numb and like I wasn't part of my own body anymore. It felt as though I was watching it happen to someone else and not me. I always thought I'd fight back and have a strong flight response, but instead I was frozen with fear. I don't remember where the car was or how long it took to get there. I just remember feeling kind of floppy and letting myself get tugged along. The next thing I remember was him opening the passenger door and me getting in. I think he asked me where I lived, but I couldn't answer at this point. He started telling me what a pretty girl I was, and how he just wanted a nice girl to talk to at home. I was just sat completely still and staring ahead. Then he put his hand on my thigh and started stroking it and began to touch my breast while continuing to drive one-handed. I felt disgusting and guilty, but at the time I thought I deserved it for getting in his car in the first place, so I just kind of let it happen. I remember thinking I should try to fight him off or try to get out of the car, but I honestly couldn't even speak, let alone summon the energy to struggle. I had no idea where he was taking me, but I knew we were heading away from the university area. After about 10 minutes, I seemed to unfreeze, and it really hit me what was happening. I genuinely thought I was going to die in that car. I asked him if I could get out, but he just smiled at me. I'm only 5'1" and small built, so I didn't really stand much of a chance of overpowering him, and honestly, I was still too scared to try anything. At this point, my mobile data started ringing. I'd forgotten I even had a phone. I've never answered anything so fast in my life. It was one of my housemates who I was on the night out with, asking where I was and if I wanted to meet her in a takeaway. I didn't even look to see how the guy was responding, but the next thing I know, he was pulling over and telling me to get out of the car. I had no idea where I was, so I walked around looking for a street name and rang a taxi. I was sobbing when I told the taxi driver what had happened, and he told me I had to tell the police, and even offered to take me there, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I didn't want to stay in that car any longer than I had to. I got dropped home and promised I would inform the police in the morning. I never told anyone else what happened that night, and I blame myself for being stupid enough to walk home and for not being strong enough to fight. I pretty much willingly got in his stupid car and let myself get assaulted. I could have been raped or murdered, and it might have been my fault. This whole incident has made me very distrustful. I have depression, anxiety, and issues with self-harm, which were triggered by what happened. So please, let's not meet again. This happened many years ago, probably close to 20 actually. When my single father moved myself and my two sisters to a not terrible but not great suburb of Denver, Colorado. The divorce had shattered him and our home. My mother had left him for another man, and the burden of raising 3 girls befell him. Skip forward a couple of months. I'm 10. My sisters are 8 and 6. We had grown fairly accustomed to the neighborhood and closely surrounding areas. My dad is working 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. in Denver, where all the best pay is, and the responsibility of my 2 little sisters became mine. I was the eldest, after all. We hadn't quite melded with the other kids of the area yet, but being 3 of us, we didn't really mind. We were capable of entertaining ourselves. We used to ride our bicycles everywhere, to all the surrounding neighborhoods, the hiking trails along the river that led everywhere, even along the train tracks which could be found in numerous amounts throughout the town. One set of tracks in particular, in fact, the closest set to our home, had a long ditch-like valley along the sides of it. I think in retrospect, it had to have been a safety-type flood barrier to prevent the river from flooding out the neighborhood across the street. Anyway, one of the side tracks, it was a sheer drop-off, with heavy bushes and undergrowth preventing the ground from being easily accessible, and on the other side, there had been a path carved out. It appeared to be by vehicles, maybe servicing the train tracks in prior years, but was extremely steep. A bicycle was more reasonable than a vehicle in my opinion, or an ATV. They called it Dead Man's Ditch. I found this out later on, but this information doesn't become relevant until later. So as I said, we used to ride our bikes around town a lot, especially in the summer months, during the day while Dad was at work, and we could travel farther than he allowed. We also had a game we played, similar to Punch Buggy, combined with the license plate game. If any of us saw a license plate with double or triple characters consecutively, double B's or triple zeros, we would announce it and then attempt to hit one another. It was barbaric, but we were siblings and it wasn't so outlandish. I don't want to share mine or my sister's names here, but on this particular day, we had been riding around for a few hours and were past the hottest part of the day. It was cooling down and gearing up for sunset. We had made our way back towards home and were less than a 2-minute bike ride from the house. I had been hanging back a bit, so both my little sisters were in front of me, the youngest in front, the middle coming up her left, furthest from the street, and myself about 6 feet behind. A few minutes prior, a silver sedan had driven past us, going the opposite way we were. The car's plate had double 6s, which I had called first. As we were headed up the street, though, I heard a vehicle accelerate impatiently behind me. This set off red flags because where we were riding, we actually affected the oncoming lane. This vehicle was headed the same way we were, in a completely unhindered lane. I turned to look, and automatically glanced first at the license plate, then at the silver sedan. Yep, Mr. Double Sixes was back. Now I could see him. Hispanic, mid-40s, wearing a blue and red faded farmer flannel, with no shirt underneath. He didn't say a word. He just looked at me for a second, then sped up, veering into our lane. I watched in horror as his open driver's side window lined up with my baby sister, and he reached out and grabbed her hand and the handle to her bicycle. He slowed down a bit, trying to pull my sister off her bike and into his open window, but something happened in his car, because all of a sudden he released her and put both hands back on the wheel. She took the chance and pushed like hell on her bike, racing towards Dead Man's Ditch. My other sister and I followed suit. After a moment of what I now know was tunnel vision, I heard the acceleration of the sedan again behind me. By this time we were all hysterical, and I was trying desperately to see through tears. This guy wasn't giving up. Whatever his deal was, he didn't want to let us go. Dead Man's Ditch was approaching quickly. Thinking on my feet, I directed both sisters down the ditch, assuming double sixes wouldn't destroy his vehicle attempting to follow. My youngest sister cowered in fear at the top, whimpering about being afraid of falling. The middle sister didn't need to be told twice. She flew up the hill like it was nothing. As I caught up to them, the car right on my back tire, I said, "Just go, this guy's gonna kill us." I remember hearing her take a big breath and let her tire go down the hill. I held my breath until I was right behind her. All three of us made it down the hill, and the guy pulled his car right up to the opening of the path. He got out of his car and was stark naked, wearing only the aforementioned flannel over shirt, and boasting a giant hard-on which he proceeded to tug and wave in our general direction. I stood between my sisters and this creep, and after a few minutes of his exposure, I guess he decided we weren't worth the destruction of his car. He got back in and drove away. My sisters were both hysterical, although my 10-year-old mind had switched to business mode, and the tears had ceased to flow. My only concern was getting us all home safely. We waited for about half an hour, but the car never came back. We braved emerging from the trail, and hightailed it home. When we got home, we told my dad everything. He was outraged, and understandably so, and took us in his car to drive around and try to find the man. We didn't find him, but my dad called the police once we got back home, and we filed a report. Unfortunately, with only a description of silver four-door car with a license plate that began in 66 and an older Hispanic man, it wasn't enough to track him down. They filled in Dead Man's Ditch a couple months later, but not before it saved our lives. A couple years back when I was in college, I was the victim of a long-term stalker. This is a pretty long story and really builds on itself. I've cut down a bit to be more coherent, but I've not changed any of the facts. Also, quick note, in the texting sections, the things I say are always prefaced with me. The other stuff in quotes is the stalker. It started out fairly innocuous on Valentine's Day. I started to receive secret admirer-type text messages from an unknown number. I assumed it was a friend of mine playing a joke, as I was in a room with a handful of tech-savvy people at the time. I tried to gauge their reactions, and asked if anyone could be messing with me. They all denied it, and I believed them since they're pretty bad liars. It was further confirmed that it was none of them when I got a phone call from the number. A voice on the other end said, "Is this my name?" I replied, "Yes, who is this?" hoping I could identify the voice. At that point, they hung up and resumed texting. At the time, a lot of my friends lived together, and the people who didn't live there and enjoyed pranks weren't really committed or knowledgeable enough to sign up for a fake number texting service. Things started to get weird when the person began asking pretty personal questions, including repeatedly asking, "Are you doing something tonight?" To which I replied, "Yes." I was working, but they kept insisting we should meet up. On top of all of this, I was getting various messages sent to me from a separate email. This confirmed it wasn't a real number, and now I had a username to connect with the person. I don't know if it was their intention, but I enjoy trying to figure out shit like this, and took it upon myself to expose this person without giving away anything about myself. So I kept it up. I texted them back for a while, and dug more and more information about the person, compiling it into a profile and eliminating possibilities. Unfortunately, this just encouraged them, as they insisted I send pictures, take pics add to the convo, etc. Then they sent a weird one. a white lacy dress hanging in their closet with the accompanying text. My wedding dress for when I marry you. Pic of your reaction? No. Why not? Please, just pics of your surrounding, your room, your face, anything. You gotta tell me who you are, otherwise I'm definitely not taking any pictures. I'm not telling you who I am until I feel comfortable. You gotta be fucking kidding me. You're the one who's uncomfortable. They continued to pry about where I was going to be that evening, and I still refused to give details. Then they dropped where they were going to be, a party on campus that night. I couldn't go regardless, since I was working. I should also mention that the texting conversation was all over the place. It was like 3 different people were all trying to talk to me about different things all at once. Again, I was bombarded with personal questions about past relationships and what kind of girl do you find yourself most attracted to? There was a little bit more back and forth. Not too interesting. And then I got another bombshell. They asked if I lived in apartment 68, which I did. I lied. Close, but not quite. Oh, sorry, I could have sworn. Where do you live? Are you involved with anyone at the moment? I recognized the style of apartment they were in based on a picture from earlier, so I decided to throw a curveball. You live in this complex, right? What? How do you know? I recognize your door. All the shitty apartments had the same color door frame, which was visible on the edge of a picture they sent. The conversation kind of fizzled out here. I didn't go to that party, and didn't get any more texts. Among the pictures they sent me were some screenshots of my Facebook, photos of their bed, a pipe, some posters, and other pretty boring stuff. That was back in February. Fast forward to October the following school year. I was a senior and busy as fuck. One evening I get a text from an unknown number. Is this my full name? So I played dumb, pretending like I wasn't freaking out that after so many months, this person was contacting me again, and I still hadn't figured out who it was. These questions were instantly more personal, and really weirded me out. Don't ruin the fun. Not knowing who I am is part of the mystery. I won't tell you who I am. Not now. Too much to lose, and I don't want you to know. Not because I'm being cruel. It's just better if you didn't. That doesn't make sense. Trust me, you don't want to know. You'd be better off not knowing. Just trust me. Okay, whatever. Why are you texting me again? Are you mad at me? I just have no one to talk to. Does my personhood really matter? Can we talk about something else? I was pretty tired of this shit, and trying to work, but I did want to see if I could pick out any more details, so I'm doing the bare minimum to keep this going. Do you celebrate Halloween? I guess I'm boring you. I have a better question. Have you ever been in love? No. How do you know if you've never experienced it? For a response so extreme, you'd think you've experienced it before, but I guess it's a matter of perspective. You must be a godly man, then. These texts are coming so fast that I can barely keep up. Was that too harsh? At this point, I just responded with What a response. Bye. The next day, around the same time, I get another text. Keep in mind the person is referring to their friend, but I honestly believe this friend was made up. I was talking to my friend about you today. Who's your friend? Don't you want to know what we talked about? Yeah, sure. Then about 3 hours later, they replied. We talked about how you seem like the type of person to fall in love easily. You're a sap. Not in a negative way, just an observation. Like you're wishing for the one. All you care about is finding an identity. That would be the most awkward thing ever. Why are you so eager? Wouldn't you be weirded out? Probably not. We've been in a class together before. What year? Maybe if you got to know me, you'd figure it out. At this point, I asked her to tell me a little bit about herself. Hey, why didn't you comment about the observation my friend and I made? Say how you feel. What does that mean? Say how you feel. This makes me uncomfortable. You never asked me any questions. I started messing with them, asking really random questions. This made him really mad. Do you like cats? Long walks on the beach? I live by the beach. Which one? A famous one. A lot of people have sex on the beach under the blanket of night. Near a city? At this point, she proceeded to tell me the state and town I'm from. How do you know I'm from there? The internet is my best friend. Are you nervous? You're just a boy. You're so boyish. Let's admit it's nothing bad. It's cute. How old are you? At this point, they kept asking me a bunch of random questions. Then they sent me a ton of different random photos from Google. My friend asked me to ask you something, but I don't think I will. What? Can we change subjects? How was your day? Mine was bad, but I don't want to relive it again. It was something I did wrong, so I only have myself to blame. She wanted to ask something intimate, but I'm not going to share. Since you don't like talking about that, it's extreme and you're probably not going to answer. I feel sick asking. Don't have me, I'm just the messenger. I'm embarrassed. You're not going to answer. I could. Okay, so we really want to know if you're a virgin or not. Scratch the virgin part. Ever had intercourse is a better phrase. I knew you wouldn't answer. I didn't answer and they didn't write anything else. That was October. This is December, the end of the semester. Hey! Who's this? It's me. I can tell you who I am when I leave campus. I'm never going to see you again, but I can tell you who I am. Okay, tell me. When I leave campus, I'm never going to see you again. I'm going to be gone. You're so serious. Hello? I'm leaving next week. You're ruining it, though. Now I want to punch you. Sorry, I didn't mean to send that last one. Oops. Then they proceeded to call me multiple times. I denied every call, but they kept coming. I think there were 14 just that night. Then a text from a new fake number. Please stop texting me. Then there were more calls. I turned my phone off. The following week, I was in the class I TA'd. Students were pressing their final work onto the projector, and I had queued multiple tabs on the projection computer. 2 different students had work on Google Drive. When the second student logged into their account, they didn't open a private window, so I logged out the first student. I saw this happen, but the first student wasn't in the room, so when she came back, I asked her to re-log in. We were both standing in the projection booth. She was at one end of the computer, and I was messing with the sound system on the other side. But I happened to turn and look at the projector screen when she was logging into Google. This hit me like a ton of bricks. The username she logged in with was the same username as the TextNow account that had been sending me photos. I quickly turned away and pretended to be busy with something until she finished opening her work. I thanked her, and she left the booth without realizing her mistake. I tried to play it cool, but inside I was going crazy for the rest of the class. After almost a year, I finally knew who it was. She had finally slipped up, and honestly I was much more scared now than I had ever been. This person had a history of being pretty creepy around my friends, and although she had never personally interacted with me outside of class, all of my friends had had very strange experiences. As a side note, here are 2 abbreviated ones to fully illustrate her craziness. My friend Michael was working endlessly on his thesis in the building. He was about 50 hours into a no-sleep work binge, and it's like 7 a.m. She walks in and starts working on a computer in the lab. Another guy, Dave, comes in and remarks about Michael. You're still here? Yeah, I've been working for days, starting to see things out of the corner of my eye. Sometimes I see a tall man in a suit. She immediately turns around and says, You see him too? Michael has no idea what to say, and Dave makes a joke about being the ghost of the building. She doesn't say anything after and goes back to work. Another friend, Isaac, also worked late in this building, and sometimes would find her waiting outside the front door at 3 a.m., and she would follow him home. Occasionally she showed up outside his door at night and demanded to be let in. One time while I was actually at his place, she came to the back door with a peephole and knocked for upwards of 20 minutes. We pretended not to be home and shut all the blinds on the front of the house and went upstairs. There's plenty more to tell about their interactions, including one where she attacked him at a party. But that's delving way into another story. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave feedback in the comments below, as well as perhaps like, share, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have a personal story that you'd like to submit, or you'd like to just send me a message, links to all of my social media will be in the description for the video below. This includes my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the theme of the story is, if it has any, the name of the story, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious at all about the music used in this video, the music is always listed in the description below, in the order which it appears. I also have links to the artists and list the tracks by name, just in case you want to find more of their work. Last but not least, if you have any criticism, please be sure to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.